Hey, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. So happy to be here on this Monday as we have got a jam-packed show. Just want to remind all the viewers out there to like and subscribe to the Facebook page and YouTube channel, as I try to do this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I will not have a show this Friday, but I will have a show this Wednesday previewing the weekend, and we have got a jam-packed weekend of football. As far as college football semifinals, I will preview those games. The NFL wild card playoffs, 5 straight days of just outstanding football games that we are going to be able to cover. Going to talk about the local stuff around the Chattahoochee Valley, including the Columbus River Dragons, Columbus State, and high school basketball, and what we've got on the slate for Georgia Alabama Sports Live. But before I get into anything, I do want to talk about this Colga documentary. I actually saw it over the weekend, and I do have some thoughts on this. I know this doesn't really have anything to do with sports. Well, it kind of does have something to do with sports because these kids that they centered this documentary on that deal with the broken homes and gangs. It basically, the documentary was about gang violence, and just the murder rate in Columbus was just astonishing. It was like, I was like completely shocked. In 2021, it was like 60 homicides. 90% of them were gang related. So it really takes a deep dive into the gang culture in Columbus. And you talk about in the documentary, coming from a broken home and nothing to do in Columbus. And, I kind of tie that to sports because I love calling games. I love going to gymnasiums and football stadiums to cover these student athletes that deserve the coverage. And I really think that if we shine the spotlight on these kids that are just incredible athletes, I mean, there is stuff to do in Columbus. We've got amazing sports teams. I do think that documentary was, by the way, it was done very well. I know it wasn't sports related, but the people that actually did the documentary, that was top notch. It was done very well. Now, if you want to watch the documentary, you got to pay for it. I mean, it is on Amazon Prime and is on Apple TV, but it does cost $5.99. And I'm not going to say it was well worth it. I should have waited until it came out on a free streaming service, but I was curious. I wanted to see the documentary because it featured the place that I've lived in for the past 10 years. I love Columbus. I don't think that talking about the gang violence that happens in the city is going to scare me away from going to a rough neighborhood at nighttime. I know that gang problem is just a problem statewide, nationwide, to be honest. But I don't think that it should put a bad light to our city. I love this city. I love broadcasting in this city. It's been the perfect sports market for me to get back into broadcasting like I did 3 years ago. And I really want to just continue making this city better because it is better and we deserve better as a community. And I know that people can watch the documentary and turn a blind eye to everything that's happening as far as gang violence goes. And well, that doesn't apply to me because I live on the northern part of the city where gang violence is not a factor, but it could happen anywhere. As you've shown, like they talk about the stories of people that you wouldn't even think would be in a gang, and it has nothing to do with race. There's gang violence in all sorts of races, and it was just an eye-opener, and I did appreciate the documentary. It was done well. All right, today is Black Monday. We actually, as I go on the air right now, there could be some firings as we speak because I'm doing this Monday morning. We did have our first firing that happened late last night, a one-and-done coach for the New England Patriots. Even though they got the quarterback of the future, Gerard Mayo, out as New England head coach. What does that tell you? When you have a one-and-done coach, that means they're going after somebody. I think they're going after Mike Vrabel. They could go after Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is one of the hottest candidates to coach. And it makes me wonder, what about the Atlanta Falcons? Well, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. This was a very compelling game. I watched this game, and I also had a split screen and was watching the Buccaneers and Saints. There was a slight chance that the Falcons could make the playoffs. When the Saints had a 19-13 lead and the Falcons were up 24-17, there was a glimpse of hope that the Atlanta Falcons would be hosting they would probably have gotten the third seed, right? They would be hosting the Washington Commanders in Atlanta. I don't know, but it didn't happen. The Falcons lose to the Carolina Panthers 44-38. There's a lot of disgruntled Falcons fans out there that wants Raheem Morris gone after 1 year. Look, if you're going to fire Raheem Morris after 1 year, you better have a plan in place. You better get like a Cliff Kingsbury or a Ben Johnson, somebody that can help develop Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. is the future. He had some incredible throws. That throw to Drake London had a career day. Bijan Robinson had a career day. Michael Penix Jr. threw for more passing yards in his career than any other game. And, he's only had 3 games. It's a small sample size, but the Falcons defense allowed Bryce Young to look like a Pro Bowler. And I cannot believe they lost this game. And this is the back-to-back week that the Falcons lose the coin toss and don't even touch the ball in overtime. We'll get into that. I don't like the overtime rule. But the Atlanta Falcons dropped this one when they could have won this game. This was a game that I should not have to watch and be on pins and needles thinking that, the Falcons could lose this game. They were better than Carolina. They should have won the game. Carolina didn't even have Chuba Hubbard. And Bryce Young all of a sudden looked amazing. He accounted for 5 touchdown passes or 5 touchdowns. And even though the Buccaneers were able to get the victory over the Saints, there was just that small hope. And really, what also was at stake is a winning season to go 9-8, to build off of something. Now, I'm questioning the leadership and time management from Raheem Morris because, again, he had some time management issues. Falcons, when they took the 24-17 lead at the half, I had confidence that they were going to get this done. They're going to find a way to beat Carolina. There was 2 straight possessions the Falcons had. An interception by Michael Penix Jr., no fault of his, and then a missed field goal. And it's like, here we go again. And then the Carolina Panthers, first of all, when you're just moving the ball at will down the field like the Panthers did, something's not working. You need to generate a pass rush, which the Falcons have been one of the worst pass rushing teams in the league. They have the least amount of sacks. They have the least amount of quarterback pressures. And so it got me thinking, why don't you change up the defense? You're in zone and Bryce Young is picking you apart. So it's a frustrating morning. Where do we go from here? Falcons in the offseason. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I hope that, if it is Raheem Morris, if you retain him, something's got to change. The culture's got to change. We're tired of this mediocrity. The Falcons haven't made the playoffs since 2017. It's been bad. Yeah, I know they went 8-9. That was an improvement from 3 straight 7-10 seasons that Arthur Smith had. I think we got stability at quarterback. It's been some lean years after Dan Quinn got fired, 7-9, 7-9, 4-12, and then all of a sudden, 3 straight 7-10 years. And then Raheem Morris goes 8-9 with this roster. Maybe he is a one-and-done coach. I don't know. He might be fired. I don't know. But I just don't think he did a great job coaching with all the talent the Falcons had. They go 8-9. Are you kidding me? And they had a huge lead on the division. They defeated the Buccaneers twice. They were up by 3 games in the division because, remember, they had a 2-game lead when the Buccaneers lost to the 49ers, when the Falcons were 6-3. And by the way, 6-3, and then they go to 8-9. You know those two games that they won were against the Raiders and the Giants. Are you kidding me? The Falcons tanked on this season. I mean, not as bad as the Kansas City Chiefs tanked yesterday. I'll get into that too. That was just ugly. But the Falcons, you should be doing better. And you got to pin this on your coach. I think he's gone. I really do. I think the Falcons fire him because you need to get in a Ben Johnson or a Cliff Kingsbury, somebody that can, light a spark and change the culture in the locker room. And there's my rant for the Falcons. I spent the first 10 minutes on this show talking about the Kolga documentary and then talking about the Falcons losing to the Carolina Panthers. Let's talk about that other game that I kind of, peeked at when the Saints had a 19-13 lead. I'm thinking, could this possibly happen? Could the Falcons make the playoffs? No. The Buccaneers ended up sustaining drives. Spencer Rattler couldn't get anything done. In fact, Tampa Bay ended up getting another possession and allowing Mike Evans to get 11 straight seasons of 1,000 yards receiving. That's a pretty big incentive. And now the Buccaneers are not only going to be in the playoffs, they're going to be the third seed, and they're going to play the Washington Commanders. I'll get into the wild card matchups later on in the show. Huge disappointing just showing by the New Orleans Saints. If you're a Falcons fan, you were just hoping that the Saints could somehow, some way find a way to win this game, but it wouldn't have mattered because the Falcons lost. Anyway, I don't have a graphic for any of the other NFL games, but I do want to talk about the other NFL games. I know I said last week that they were meaningless games. And by the way, as we talk, because, this show is going to air at noon, I'm doing this in the morning. Black Monday has officially begun. The Jacksonville Jaguars just fired Doug Peterson, who took the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl. He is out. But they retained Trent Baalke. And I have some choice words about Trent Baalke. Not really. I mean, I don't hold a grudge against anybody. He was a terrible GM in San Francisco. Let's just put it at that. So let's go ahead. Gerard Mayo's already out as the Patriots head coach. One and done, even though the Patriots have their quarterback of the future. We're going to start with that game because they beat the Bills. This was a meaningless game, but the Patriots winning cost them the number 1 overall pick. That pick is going to go to the Tennessee Titans after losing to the Houston Texans. So the Titans have the number 1 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. They do have their coach, Brian Callahan. I don't see them losing on their coach, but I do think that you go from firing Mike Vrabel to Brian Callahan and you have the worst record in the league. I mean, that just doesn't look right. All right, let's look at the other scores. As you had the Colts ended up beating the Jaguars 26-23. So Doug Peterson ends up getting fired. The Washington Commanders end up defeating the Cowboys 23-19. Cowboys finished 7-10. Does Mike McCarthy keep his job? Or does Jerry Jones end up firing him? Look, if you fire a coach, you've got to have a plan in place. The Jets, I know they have a plan in place. They're actually interviewing Rex Ryan, which he's the last coach that got the Jets to the playoffs back in 2010. So the New York Jets ended up, beating the Dolphins 32-20. Dolphins, they have no shot at getting in the playoffs with that. Tyreek Hill says he's done. So I look for Tyreek Hill to possibly go back to the Chiefs on a minimal salary. I'm not joking. I could see Tyreek Hill going back to the Chiefs just for playing the minimal salary. I'm serious about this. The Chiefs always get retreads. The Jets had a weird trick play. Aaron Rodgers did throw for his 500th career touchdown. All right, let's take a look at some of these other games. The Eagles beat the Giants, and the Eagles sat Saquon Barkley. You had the Seahawks ended up beating the Rams. The Rams fall all the way down to the 4 seed, and they're going to have to host the Minnesota Vikings in the wild card round of the playoffs. Chargers ended up beating the Raiders. The Chargers go up to the 5th seed, after the Steelers ended up losing to the Ravens on Saturday. The Bengals had a slight chance to make the playoffs. They were hoping that the Kansas City Chiefs backups could beat the Broncos. Well, I was looking at the box score. 38-0. The Broncos beat the Chiefs. It's the first time that Andy Reid has been shut out as coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, there is talks that the Chiefs tanked this game. If you look at some of these drives, it was like they weren't even trying because they don't want to put the Bengals in the playoffs because there's a chance they could end up facing them. So what do? They lose to the Broncos 38-0. I think this is going to come back to bite the Chiefs. Because they didn't play their starters, they're going to get a bye. They could possibly play the Chargers in the divisional round because I think the Chargers beat the Texans next week. The rust versus rest could factor in. I'm not kidding. Look, the Chiefs had a lot of close games this year. You don't think a division rival who they beat twice already comes into Kansas City and pulls off the upset? I could see it happening. I'm not kidding. And look, the Chargers get better anytime you have a team that's coached by Jim Harbaugh. They're going to play tough. They're going to play physical, and they just get better. I could see that happening. Let's go through some of the other games. Hey, the Sunday night game, you had the Lions ended up wrapping up the number 1 seed as they beat the Vikings 31-9. You know, the Lions are banged up, but they're going to get that bye. They're going to get rest, and they could possibly see the Vikings again in the divisional round. I'm going to make my predictions in the wild card round. And so with that, you had the Bears ended up beating the Packers 24-22. The Packers go all the way down to the 7th seed. They're going to have to play the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round. Some of the other games, I think I covered. Oh yeah, that's right. The Cardinals ended up beating the 49ers 47-24. Look, I talked about the 49ers and how the injuries were just astonishing. It was mind-blowing to see how many injuries the 49ers had this year. They finished 6-11. They're going to play a last place schedule. They got an easy schedule. I see them back in the playoffs next year in 2025. They do have the number 11 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Go get an offensive tackle. Go get Trent Williams' replacement because he is retiring. All right, so Black Monday. Here's some other coaches that could be gone today. I think the Raiders coach, Antonio Pierce, gets fired. And I think that Kevin Stefanski for the Browns is safe. We know that Brian Dable is safe. Who else is on the chopping block? Could Raheem Morris be a one-and-done coach in Atlanta? Could the Saints actually are thinking about offering Aaron Glenn. I mean, we had some firings mid-season. So we had the Saints and we had some other teams. I'm drawing a blank here. But Black Monday, I'm going to recap it on Wednesday's show because I think that more firings are coming. All right, the wild card round, we got the matchups in place. And let's start with that first game, the Los Angeles Chargers back in the playoffs with Jim Harbaugh. They got the quarterback. I think that the Texans kind of regressed a little bit with C.J. Stroud. The Texans back in the playoffs. It always seems like the Texans kick things off in the wild card playoff round. It seems like they're always that first game. They're going to be the 4:30 game on Saturday, and I know that's got to be tough. They're never in prime time. It's always the first game. But I actually think with the Chargers favored by 3, I think they get the road win here. And then you have the Saturday night game on Prime Video, the Steelers taking on the Ravens for the 3rd time. Boy, the Steelers really just let this division go. They were at one point 10-3. It looked like they were going to win this division. The Ravens are clicking on all cylinders. Hard to beat a team after you ended up losing to them. But I think that the Baltimore Ravens end up getting a win here over the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are a 9.5-point favorite. You got on Sunday the triple header, the 1 o'clock game on CBS, Broncos and Bills. Look, it's a nice story. The Denver Broncos, they have their quarterback in Bo Nix. Sean Payton, they're back in the playoffs. for the first time since they won the Super Bowl in the 2015 season. And the Denver Broncos, I think, lose to the Buffalo Bills here, which I think the Bills are the biggest threat to beat the Chiefs in the AFC playoffs. Packers and Eagles. Now, the health of Jordan Love and Christian Watson are into question. I think Jordan Love plays, but Jalen Hurts is going to come back from his concussion protocol. Saquon Barkley is well rested because he had a week off. Do you see a scenario where this was a close game week 1 in Brazil? Can the Green Bay Packers get an upset in wild card round? The 7 seed taking on the 2 seed. I think this is a bad matchup for the Eagles. I actually think that Matt LaFleur could out-coach Nick Sirianni. By the way, if the Eagles lose this game, Nick Sirianni is going to be fired because I think the Eagles are winning despite Nick Sirianni. We have the 8 o'clock Sunday night game on NBC, the Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels leading the Commanders, Dan Quinn's first year as head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, who's probably going to get a job in the offseason, and the Commanders, 12-5 record. It's the most wins they've had since their Super Bowl year back in 1991, as Jaden Daniels has done a fantastic job. And by the way, they do have a pretty good backup in Marcus Mariota. I think that he could end up getting a job somewhere. The way that he ended up winning that game and beating the Dallas Cowboys. Buccaneers are a slight favorite. They are a 3.5-point favorite. I'm calling the upset here. I think the Washington Commanders go into Tampa and beat the Buccaneers, which means if, let's say, the Eagles beat the Packers, the Buccaneers end up losing to the Commanders. Then you got the Vikings taking on the Rams on Monday Night Football next week. It's going to be a great time to be a football fan. But here's the playoff scenario I have for you. So I got the Chargers beating the Texans. I got the Ravens beating the Steelers. I've got the Bills beating the Broncos. I got the Eagles beating the Packers. I got the Commanders beating the Buccaneers. And I got the Vikings beating the Rams, which means that the highest seed remaining would be the Washington Commanders. So in the divisional round, Washington would play Detroit on the 18th on Saturday. And then the first game would be the Chargers in the Chiefs, which means it would be Baltimore taking on Buffalo. And then you would have Minnesota going to Philly to play the Eagles. How about those matchups? And I'm telling you, I think the Vikings beat the Eagles in the divisional round. If those are the matchups, if the Commanders beat the Buccaneers and they have to play the Lions, I think it's going to be Lions, Vikings in the NFC Championship, and I think it's going to be Bills, Chiefs in the AFC Championship. And my Super Bowl, I actually think it's going to be, I want it to be Lions, Bills, but I think it's going to be Vikings, Chiefs. I honestly do. All right. So much to get into. Why don't we take a break? Let's go pay some bills. When we come back, I'm going to preview the college football semifinals, and then I'll wrap this thing up talking about all the local things that happen in and around the Chattahoochee Valley. You don't want to go anywhere. It is the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live, and we'll be back after this.
Introducing Gatorade Water. Alkaline and electrolyte infused for great taste. Gatorade Water, always in motion.
And welcome back to the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live on this January 6th, 2025. Happy to be here. It's a new year. It's a fresh start for this show. I got a feeling 2025 is going to be a big year, not just for the Sports Beat, but for Georgia Alabama Sports Live. For my broadcasting career, when I look back and I see all the things that I've done, all the games that I've called, I've just been truly blessed, and I love talking about sports. Everybody loves to talk about sports on the national scene. But when I started this podcast 5 years ago, I wanted to focus on local sports to Columbus. So I would include the River Dragons, the Lions, back when the Rapids existed. I included them. We got Columbus United. The Cleanstones opener is in 100 days, now 99 days. It was 100 yesterday. But so much sports to get into. Later on in the show, I'm going to talk about high school basketball, where we're going to be for Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Columbus State, they had some conference big games against Augusta, but they ended up falling. But they got a big conference game coming up this Wednesday. River Dragons split 2 on the road in Athens. So I'll get into all of that, but let's go ahead and talk about the college football semifinals. Isn't this fun if you are a college football fan? So before I analyze these games, I admit I had to listen to Josh Pate just to get his insight, because I don't think anybody covers college football, breaks down the games like Josh Pate does. So that's why I listen to him, so I can have just a better insight on what to expect in these games. Let's go ahead and start with the first game on the 9th, the Orange Bowl. It's going to be Notre Dame and Penn State, 2 historic college football programs up in the North. And I'm telling you, I mean, these 2 fan bases are very passionate, 2 talented teams. Penn State just seemed like they couldn't get over the hump until now. They were able to have a pretty easy path. Some say that Notre Dame, who should win this game. And I don't know. I think that Penn State has got a pretty good quarterback in Drew Aller. I could see Penn State winning this game, but I actually think the way that Notre Dame ended up beating Georgia was very impressive. They got a pretty good coach in Marcus Freeman. And I think that Penn State found their coach in James Franklin. This is going to be a great game. Notre Dame is a slight 2-point favorite. If Notre Dame wants to win this game, Riley Leonard's going to have to pass for more than 90 yards. I think that Notre Dame had a little flash in the pants, getting the kickoff return, getting the big fumble. I think Penn State's O-line is going to be a little bit more solid than Georgia's. I think that Penn State does keep this close. Drew Allard's got some pretty good running backs. They've got a stout defense, but I don't think Penn State's really been tested, because they just rolled through SMU, and they ended up beating Boise State last week. This is going to be their first big test. Can Penn State get over the hump to try to get to the national championship? If anything, we look at the 4 teams that are remaining. One, you're going to have a first-year national champion. You might have a national champion. You haven't won since 2014, Ohio State. Texas hasn't won since 2006. Notre Dame hasn't won since 1998, and Penn State hasn't won since 1987. So, yeah, a lot of people are saying Ohio State is the clear-cut favorite. But if it's not Ohio State, we could have a national champion. On this side, we could see a team that's playing for the national championship. I know Notre Dame played for the national championship back in 2013, but these 2 historic teams who were absolutely great in the 80s, Joe Paterno, Lou Holtz, this is – I wish this game could be played more, because when you talk about a fan base up in the northern part of the country – Notre Dame and Penn State, it doesn't get any better than this. This is a matchup that look, and I know I'm not trying to be SEC biased, but the SEC was down this year. Part of it was the NIL, the transfer portal. You don't have a 5-star offensive tackle that's backing up your left tackle in the waiting. And so when Georgia was depleted by injuries, they don't have those backups to just plug and play. So they suffered on the offensive line, and that's why they lost that game. Plus, they had a backup quarterback. Gunnar Stockton wasn't Carson Beck that was capable of making those big-time throws. It's going to be a great game. I know that I'm looking forward to it. Thursday, January the 9th, the Orange Bowl down at Hard Rock Cafe Stadium in Miami. All right, let's talk about the Cotton Bowl. This is looking like it's going to be a home crowd for Texas, right there in Jerry World in Dallas. But Ohio State is the best team left in college football. Will Howard is playing better. He's got weapons. Jeremiah Smith might be the best player in college football. He is incredible. Emeka Egbuka, pretty good complimentary wide receiver. The running backs, even though they didn't really run the ball very well against Tennessee and Oregon, you have Quishon Junkins and Travion Henderson. Some people say that the O-line is the weakness of Ohio State. That's why Michigan was able to push them around in that regular season game. But you don't spend $20 million on NIL to get these special players. Like, I think Caleb Downs might be the best player in the country on the defensive side of the ball. So Ohio State might have the best offensive player in Jeremiah Smith and the best defensive player in Caleb Downs. Ohio State should win this game. They are a 6-point favorite. Now, Texas overall has good players. They have probably the best defense in the country. This is going to be a good matchup, and I'm hoping that Quinn Ewers doesn't throw interceptions, because if he plays a clean game, I think that Texas could keep this close. But I got Ohio State winning this game, and right now, my national championship is going to be Ohio State and Notre Dame. I think that will be the national championship that will play in Atlanta on January the 20th. All right, let's switch gears and let's talk college basketball, because we had conference play in the SEC. And Georgia coming into conference play, they went to Oxford to take on Ole Miss, 12-1. They come in and they end up losing to Ole Miss 63-51. They are now 12-2 on the season. If you look at their schedule, they host Kentucky at Stegman Coliseum this Tuesday, and then they play Oklahoma at home next Saturday. They go on the road to Knoxville to face the number one team in college basketball, Tennessee, and they host Auburn on the 18th. Georgia could easily start SEC play 0-5, and that's not going to bode well for a team that I was hoping could make it to the NCAA tournament. It doesn't happen often, but Georgia has a pretty good player in Asa Newell, who is projected to be a lottery pick, and I like Mike White. I still think that Mark Fox got a raw deal as the Georgia coach. I mean, Tom Crean was a disaster, even though he recruited Anthony Edwards. I'm a big Georgia basketball fan. I want to see Georgia do well, and they do play Kentucky on the SEC network this Tuesday. Looking forward to it. All right, looking at the other SEC scores, how about Auburn? They are the second-ranked team in all of the country. Ended up getting a big win over Missouri, 84-68. How about the Auburn Tigers? Looking pretty good. Janai Broom with 24 points. They are now 13-1, and they will take on Texas on the road. Texas is unranked, but they are 11-3. Remember, Texas went to the Elite Eight last year. They went to the Sweet 16 last year and lost to Tennessee. And Texas is unranked now in the SEC. Auburn has another road test. They will play South Carolina. They should win both these road games, and then they will host Mississippi State on the 14th. I think that Auburn should be rolling in their SEC play. And when I have my bracketology show in a couple weeks, I think that Auburn is going to be projected to be a number one seed, unless crazy happens where they end up losing 3 or 4 games. But they are so deep, I just don't see that happening. I think that Auburn is one of the best teams in college basketball, and the SEC conference is absolutely amazing. We had another massive game, Kentucky and Florida. Kentucky ends up getting a big win at Rump Arena, 106-100 over Florida. Tennessee ends up defeating John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks 76-52. Mississippi State over South Carolina, 85-50. Vanderbilt ends up beating LSU. Alabama ends up just whomping Oklahoma 107-79, and then Texas A&M ends up beating Texas 80-60. Here's what we got on the slate for Tuesday in college basketball in the SEC. Tennessee and Florida. This is going to be down in Gainesville. This is a huge matchup on ESPN2, 7 o'clock. Georgia, of course, hosts Kentucky. Auburn on the road against Texas. Vanderbilt hosting Mississippi State. Both teams 13-1. And LSU and Missouri, both unranked teams, both 11-3. That's going to be 9 o'clock on the SEC network. Let's take a look at the ACC, because over the weekend we had Georgia Tech ended up getting a big win over Boston College. So congratulations to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They win 85-64, and Georgia Tech right now is 8-7 overall on the season. And right now they would not be in the NCAA tournament. They're going to have to start getting some conference wins. They're going to have to go to the Carrier Dome on Tuesday, where they will take on Syracuse. On the road again hosting SMU this Saturday, and then they're going to be back at McCamish Pavilion hosting Clemson next week. So let's take a look at the ACC scores over the weekend. North Carolina ends up getting a 1-point win over Notre Dame, 74-73. It was Duke on the road taking on SMU and winning 89-62. Pitt ends up beating Stanford 83-68, and Clemson over Cal 80-68. Right now, Duke, Clemson, and Pitt are the teams that are undefeated in ACC play, followed by Wake Forest and Louisville, both with a 3-1 record. I've said it before in this show that the SEC is the best conference in college basketball, even though the ACC is loaded with some talented teams. Duke can be a number one seed. I like Cooper Flagg as possibly a Naismith Award winner. I think that Duke and Auburn might end up being on a collision course, especially with those two fantastic players, Cooper Flagg and Janai Broome. Let's switch gears and let's go over to the National Basketball Association. The most surprising team in the NBA right now is the Houston Rockets. They end up beating the Los Angeles Lakers 119-115. How about the Kings? Interim coach Doug Christie is 4-1. They end up demolishing the Golden State Warriors 129-99, and the Kings are on the doorstep of the playoffs. Possibly an NBA Finals preview. The Oklahoma City Thunder end up beating the Boston Celtics 105-92, and the Thunder have the second best record in basketball behind the Cleveland Cavaliers, who just keep rolling 115-105 over the Charlotte Hornets, 31-4. How about that record? And now I want to talk about the Hawks, because the Hawks dropped another road game, this time to the Los Angeles Clippers on Saturday, and the Clippers welcome back Kawhi Leonard. How convenient was that? Kawhi Leonard plays his first game of the season, and it just happens to be against the Hawks. The Clippers win this game 131-105. The Atlanta Hawks dropped their third straight road contest, and they are now 18-18 on the season. And I said before we even had this start, when the Hawks were going to have a 6-game road trip, that it was going to be tough. They're going to be dropping some games. They lose to the Nuggets, they lose to the Lakers, and now they lose to the Clippers. They should beat the Jazz. The Jazz are 9-25. They're not very good this year. They've got to beat the Jazz. And then the Suns, who has been, if the season ended today, the Suns would not be in the playoffs. How is that even possible? You change coaches to Mike Budenholzer, and if the Suns miss the playoffs, I mean, they have the big three, don't they? They just don't have anything else after that. Anyway, the frustrations. They're back at State Farm Arena this Saturday, taking on the Houston Rockets, which the Rockets have the second best record in the Western Conference. The Rockets look fantastic. The Grizzlies look fantastic. I love seeing the turnaround with these teams, but you know that the Denver Nuggets right there sitting at the 4 seed could really get things going. And I think that Dallas has fallen off just a little bit. Minnesota's fallen off because I think that the Knicks ended up winning that Karl Anthony Towns trade. The Timberwolves, who went to the Western Conference Finals last year, 17-17. They are a game up on the Kings for that 10th and final spot just to get into the play-in game. Look, I love the NBA. I know the NBA is down this year. The ratings are down. Too many teams are just jacking up three-pointers. You're having really high scores in games. I mean, there's that LeBron fatigue. He's turned 40. The Lakers are not a championship team. Nobody wants to see the Boston Celtics win again. I mean, you look at since 2019, we've had a champion, a different champion every year. We had Toronto in 19, the Lakers in 20, the Bucks in 21, the Warriors in 22, and in 23, I forgot who it was. Anyway, the Celtics ended up winning it in 24. Oh, yeah, the Nuggets won it in 23. So we've had champions every year, different champions. There's parity now. There's no dynasties. I remember back when everybody hated the Miami Heat. Unless you were a Miami Heat fan, the Heat were the most hated team back in 2012, 2013. I mean, just look at how bad Ray Allen was just hated by the Boston Celtics for leaving the Celtics to go to the Heat to chase a ring. I mean, it is what it is. I love the NBA, though. Anyway, all right, let's wrap this show up. Let's talk local stuff. Yeah, save the best for last. Local stuff to Columbus. We got the River Dragons. They split a series with the Athens Rock Lobsters over the weekend. They dropped the first game over in the Atkins Ford Arena. And by the way, kudos to all those River Dragons fans that made the trip to Athens. Hats off to you. I hope it was a great experience. The River Dragons did beat Athens on Saturday 5-2. So right now, this is where it stands. The River Dragons have 48 points. They are a point behind the leader in the Continental Division, the Carolina Thunderbirds, which they will play the Thunderbirds this weekend, the 10th and the 11th of January. Leading goal scorer is rookie sensation Ryan Hunter with 10 goals, and Kyle Moore has got 19 assists. Go Dragons. I'm excited. Want to try to get out to a game. I know we talk about the River Dragons on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show. I'm just excited to see where the River Dragons can go. As far as Columbus State University, well, they had a tough weekend. Both the Cougars and Lady Cougars fell to Augusta University. Let's start with the Cougars, ranked 19th in the country. They lose to Augusta 79-75. They are now 10-2 on the season, 1-1 in Peach Belt Conference play, and they will host Georgia Southwestern State University this Wednesday at the Lumpkin Center. The CSU Lady Cougars fell to Augusta University 63-52. They are now 7-4 on the season, 1-1 in region play, and they will also take on the Georgia Southwestern State University Lady Golden Hurricanes, whatever you want to call them. If you can't make it to the Lumpkin Center, well, you know that Scott Miller's got you covered on Cougar TV and WCUG 88.5. Let's touch up on high school basketball. So over the weekend, called a few games for Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Had the privilege of calling the Pacelli-Dothan game along with the coach, Coach Corey Black, as that was the first game that we've done together. Great chemistry. It was a great game. Pacelli ends up getting the big win over Dothan, which was ranked third in 7A in Alabama. Pacelli still undefeated, 12-0, as they got a big region game this Tuesday, which you can catch on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. They will be hosting Calvary Christian. I also was on the call for Sumter County Spencer over in Spencer High, a big region contest. However, Sumter County ends up winning both games. By the way, Spencer was down by 14 points with 4 minutes to go, and Spencer almost won that game. They lose that game by 1 point. But, yeah, they'll have to regroup, and they will play Shaw on Tuesday. By the way, we got a big slate of games for Tuesday, and you know that Georgia Alabama Sports Live is going to have you covered for that. Central boys end up getting a big win over Auburn over the weekend, 58-53. However, the Central girls fell to Auburn, 67-55. Glenwood ends up getting the sweep over Pike Liberal Arts. And on Friday, they get the sweep over Northeast Methodist Academy. And then Calvary ends up beating Strong Rock on the road on Friday. And then they beat New Creation Christian Academy on Saturday. We have that game for you on Georgia Alabama Sports Live, 73-52. And then I was on the call along with Thrift Behringer for Carver and Providence Christian Academy. So with that being said, I called 5 games in 2 days. I know I'm a little exhausted, but that's okay. This is what I love doing. And let's talk about that lineup for all these games on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Starting on Tuesday, we got Calvary and Pacelli. You know we got you covered. Glenwood is taking on Beulah. And we also have Columbus and Kendrick. I'm excited about these games. We've got Carver. No, not Carver. Jordan is taking on Hardaway. We've got Shaw taking on Spencer. We've got Rehoboth taking on Russell County. Also, we've got Brookstone hosting Westfield School. Central's on the road taking on Opelika. And Auburn is hosting Smith Station. Oh, so many great games. One other game I do want to talk about because I want to make sure to give him love. A big shout out to Coach Oglesby over there at Central Talbotton. Central Talbotton ended up hosting Chatco. However, they did fall 90-70. Central Talbotton will take on Schley County on Tuesday, as we did feature Chaco and Marion County in the Border Wars. I cannot wait for that matchup on January the 18th when Marion County will come to Casita to take on Chaco. And by the way, Chaco actually will take on Schley County this Friday. So I want to make sure to give them some love here on the show. One more thing before we close this show. Thank you for your support. I want to try to keep this thing going. We are at episode 961. I promise you I will get to 1,000 episodes. That is my personal goal, is to get to 1,000 episodes. I wanted to keep this thing going. I've been off the radio for 2 months now. I still wish Ryan O'Neal a speedy recovery. I hope he gets back into the industry soon because he is just a talented producer and an on-air talent that is gratefully missed. I know being, at home and just after recovering from surgery, it's hard to get back into the industry because you can't get out and about. I'm hoping that he still hones his craft and he's doing stuff online. But yeah, I wish him a speedy recovery. And I thank you for that opportunity for putting me on the radio for the past 3 years. All right, that will do it. That is our show. Thank you to everybody tuning in, and we'll see you Wednesday